There is no doubt that adequate electricity supply stimulates economic activities in any country and catalyzes nations' drive towards industrialization. However, in Nigeria, electricity to homes and businesses remain dismal due to poor power policy choice, bad leadership, and corruption. Since the privatization of the power sector, there has been several attempts to ramp up power generation and supply in country, which has not yielded the desired results. However, with the emergence of Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu as the president-elect of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, industry players in the energy sector are hopeful that a bad presidency will, all things being equal, achieve the objectives of stable, affordable, and sustainable electricity for homes and businesses in Nigeria by deploying strategic policy options and more. Joining me now via Zoom to talk about this development as we set the next administration, set an agenda for the next administration in the power sector amid contending issues. Well, he is a professor of energy and electricity law at the University of Lagos. Professor Yemi Oke is also the national coordinator by 23 academic group. Professor Yemi Oke, thank you so much for your time. It's good to have you join the program.
Thank you very much for the fantastic job you are doing at TBC. Very objective, very analytical.
Thank you so much, Prof. Prof, let's start with Nigeria's power sector. This is a sector I've followed so well. Immediately after privatization, then with President Goodluck Jonathan, the former president, many thought that at that point, all was going to get well with transmission, generation, transmission, and distribution. But today, we still say the same thing. First, let's do an overview of where we find ourselves and where do you think Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu and his team can pick this up from?
Thank you very much for that question. Where are we? We're nowhere near the expected mileage we thought we'll have attained as a nation. Quite frankly, we seem to have exceeded in terms of the gains of the power sector. Before privatization, Nigeria was oscillating between 3,000, 4,000 megawatts actual distribution. Then, after privatization, you will have assumed that we should have more in terms of the amount of megawatt that is generated and distributed. Almost 10 years after privatization, we are still oscillating around 3,000 to 3,500 actual megawatt distribution. It's like saying before privatization of the telecoms, as when we had 100,000 lines, then 10 years down the line, we're still having 100,000 or 90,000. That's precisely the picture in the power sector. We're not where we ought to be. But as part of somebody who has been involved, volunteering, let me say, involved in the Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu project. The starting point, what really got me enthused was his clear objective, his clear focus as to what we want to do. You can imagine anybody who has a clear picture as to the power sector will definitely have my heart. It's a sector I have a lot of passion for. And that dates back to what he did in Lagos in the days of Aaron. Incidentally, I was a very young lawyer in a law firm that was advising Lagos state government. And I was part of maybe one of the youngest guys in the team working with the current vice president of Nigeria when we were doing this Aaron thing. Aaron was supposed to work. If Aaron had worked, Nigeria perhaps would not be where we are. For instance, Lagos State will have been self-sufficient in terms of electricity generation, transmission, and distribution. And that will have had multiplier effect on other states in the federation. So when I got involved, I wanted to make sure I contribute make technical input in his academic objective. Then the energy model. So I speculated the thinking of somebody who, almost a few decades ago, wanted state government to be self-sufficient in power generation. And that keyed into in my inaugural lecture, which was a kind of pioneering prognosis of the power sector. I identified 20 things that a Bola Ahmed Tinubu presidency, for what we know of him, for the experimental initiative in Aaron project we want to do. The first one is that it is almost inevitable that we have to go through another round of reacquisition and refinancing of the entities. Those who bought the entities are lacking practically in terms of financial and technical wherewithal. So we need to revisit the power sector. I'm not saying federal government should do the power sector by revoking the privatization. No, we need to revisit it and get those who have what it takes to buy it under a repackaged structure and reacquire it. Then it means the entities are going to be much more profitable even for the investors. Two, I foresee a restructuring of the discos and gencos. The federal government now holding some stakes in those entities may need to back off some of their stakes to like insignificant percentage of 5 or 10 so that the new entities will now have controlling shares. Then the gencos, assisted gencos and discos may also be encouraged to voluntarily give some concessions so that we can have a kind of robust investment and reject the power sector. I envisage the national grid concession. We can't be talking of a federated grid in the 21st century. If Lagos State initiative had worked, Lagos State will have had what is called concession grid, meaning Lagos State should be able to generate within its confines and distribute. Because that's what the constitution says. When we go to second schedule, item 13 and 14 of the constitution, it gives federal government power to generate, transmit, and distribute. It also gives state power to generate, transmit, and distribute. So we can't be talking of a federated grid in the 21st century. We also envisage that the NERC will be seriously restructured. It's not efficient. When you don't have competent regulator, don't have efficiency in terms of the regulator, then you're not going to have a kind of positive outlook in this sector. So we expect NERC to be restructured in terms of for better efficiency. The electricity management company, NEMSA, will need to be fused into a department or directorate of the NERC because it is duplicitous. It's kind of doing what a directorate or division of the NERC, meaning NEC, Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, should be doing. Then we expect that state government now are going to be participating actively because that's what the Constitution says. That is the power given to them by Constitution under Item 15 of the second schedule. Now, I expect states like Lagos will have Lagos State Electricity Regulatory Commission. My own Ogun State will have Ogun State Electricity Regulatory Commission. Bayelsa will have its own. We're going to have Kaduna State Electricity Regulatory Commission. All these states will now be active, playing major roles in power generation, transmission, and distribution. We call it decentralized electricity structure. We also need to look at a progressive licensing regime. And gladly, the party of the party that won is a progressive party. What that means is we're going to have and look for serious-minded corporate entities who will be ready to generate. And we're going to back down all the expenses, giving them licenses almost for free. If you look at their technical papers, the condition to be attached is if you're getting this license, you must generate and transmit or distribute, as it were, within 3 years or within a particular period after getting the license. So if you fail to generate or transmit after 2 years, then you start to pay back what you ought to have paid by way of penalties. So that will be structured. Then I also envisage that rural electrification fund will be abolished because it's the idea of top-down regime for power sector might not work. You don't expect federal government now to be supplying or providing electricity in the remote parts of the rural areas. That's for state and local government. We can't have rural electrification projects and fund in the hands of the federal government bureaucracy. You are not going to have any efficiency. So we are suggesting or looking at a situation in which Rural Electrification Fund is decentralized or given to states for effective administration of the fund for small-scale electricity generation and distribution. Then we also need to use that for purposes of local government-based power generation. Nigeria has 774 local governments. Just assume a state is able to get each and every of its local government to generate 1 megawatt. That means in 1 year, we're going to have 774 megawatts. The following year, we're going to have 774 megawatts, meaning in 2 years or thereabout, we'll have generated off-grid and 5 other options, megawatts that will almost equal the 3,000 plus that we are doing currently through local government. So we need to get on board state government through local government for local government-based power generation.
Prof, allow me to interject.
That will also
now,
fill in the gap of electrification.
All right, Prof, can you hear me? Allow me to interject. Yes, that is really deep, talking about distribution and how we can, reacquisition and refinancing of the power sector. But let's talk about finance now, which remains very important to me. What we have today, the Gencos are complaining that they are not being paid for gas. The transmission side, which is still being run by the federal government, will argue with you that they are not the weakest link, that they can transmit more than what they are transmitting at the moment. Then the discos will tell you that we don't have a cost-reflective tariff. So we want those that can maybe pay us, what's it called, the willing payer and willing buyer supply deal that they normally do with some areas that they know that they're ready to pay. So in all of this, we see the issue of finance. How do we bridge that gap moving forward?
Thank you very much. As I said, we got it fundamentally wrong. The privatization of the power sector was wrongly conceived, wrongly implemented. I'm not going to say fraudulently implemented. The entities that bought, companies that bought those entities never had the funds. What it did, which we saw, which we predicted, was that they were able to approach the Nigerian banks for what is called acquisition financing, on the pretext that you are going to get a lot of money from the market. After getting those entities, I think they ran out of funds to take it to the next level. So we can see the financing gap in there. And when the Nigerian banks were led into them, federal government speculated that there would be foreign direct investment. Money didn't come. No money came from abroad. They mop up a few dollars in the system to these entities to be able to acquire it. And I predicted in your studios and your studios of other media houses that within the next 5 years, at least 5 Nigerian banks will cave under debt burden of the power sector. As of today, 4 banks already got insolvent as a result of needless exposure to power sector lending. And 90% of the discos are under insolvency. They are under receivership. 95% of the discos are technically insolvent. So, federal government, you asked me the question, how will federal government continue to spend even more now, relatively, in a sector that is supposedly privatized? That means money did not come in, and federal government is going to continue to fund the power sector the way they funded it. Another challenge, which we're not addressing, is these entities approach Nigerian banks and got dollars when dollar was 160. Dollarized lending for a transaction, for a market that is based on Naira, meaning you borrowed $9 and you are going to be selling electricity in Naira. And Naira, as we speak today, is almost 600, 700. And for you now to have cost-effective tariff, you need to jack up your tariff to reflect the current dollar rate. If you continue to do that, it will get to a level that powering your houses and homes through diesel and petrol will be cheaper or might be cheaper than through the discos. So the discos are also in trouble. We are all in trouble. The only way out, we have to repackage. And that brings me to what I call M for M initiative. We've had captive, which is a kind of scheme to supply meters, and the consumers will pay, and they reduce they get back the money to reduce electricity billing. Now we're in another regime because metering is now in the hand of other entities. I said it's still wrong. The only way to go about it is we have meter manufacturers like Numbers and others in Nigeria. Let Nigerian meter manufacturers manufacture these meters. Let them be the ones to supply it. It's like when you have telecoms to give you GSM access, and then they are the ones now selling to you handsets. That doesn't make logical sense. Let those who are in the business of meters manufacture, import, update current sophisticated meters and meter Nigerian homes. Let them get finances and federal government encouragement and backing to directly be in charge of metering. Let the discourse focus on supply. Let's have those who have what it takes to invest in the power sector. They are available, but the mathematics are not aligning. If I'm investing $20 million in the power sector, I must be sure that if I'm getting this financing, I should be able to get even in a few years. So if I'm seeing a picture that points red, that meaning 10, 15, 30 years, I'm still in red, I'm going to be insolvent. I'm not going to go into it. So the facts, the figures, the financial figures are not aligning, and that is why you would not likely see any foreign direct investment in the power sector. We haven't seen them. So we need to redo a whole lot of things so that the power sector will be attractive. And one of the things I even suggested we are looking at is Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading PLC should now be a power sector net investor, just as we have repackaged NNPC now as NNPC Limited. NNPC Limited is now a going concern. MBED should not be like a business entity. MBED cannot be the one investing and making money like a PLC. MBED may be able to now attract funds. Other serious-minded investors cannot attract foreign direct investment, good dollars to rejig the power sector. The federal government now can back up its existing stakes so that these two entities will have controlling shares and now be able to run it and run it effectively. As we speak, there's no amount of power sector intervention, there's no amount of further pouring of funds into a supposedly privatized power sector that will get the power sector out of the woods. So the sector is technically insolvent, and that is why Nigerians will continue to complain of arbitrary billings. I complain of arbitrary billings. I was billed humongous amount of money until I challenged it, and somebody else said that was an error, and they reduced it to almost 500%. So we need to do a lot more so that we can repackage this power sector.
Prof, we're almost running out of time.
We have 20 points agenda. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you, Prof. Prof, you know we could spend a whole day talking about Nigeria's power sector. So let's wrap up on this note. Let's talk about the greed. Many have agreed that the capacity of this greed can't serve Nigerians, a country of 200 million people. We still have supply over and around 4,000 megawatts, sometimes lower. Now, you talked about concessioning this greed. Can you tell us how we could go about this? Then are we also thinking about other sources if this greed can't sustain us? Let's wrap it up on that note.
Thank you very much. One, I say the federal government, the NERC, has no business licensing 1 megawatts, because that's what the law says. The law says Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission is that idle and kind of indolent and not as busy. They are not going to bother themselves going through the bureaucratic process of licensing an entity to generate 1 megawatt. What's the business of a regulator like NERC licensing 1 megawatt? That should scale up. NERC should license not minimum, not less than 10 megawatts. The state government now can almost effectively take charge and be in charge of licensing of 1 to 10 megawatts, both off-grid and on-grid. So if state government are licensing 0 to 10 megawatts, that's on-grid, that is concession generation. The law is that if you are not generating up to 1 megawatt, you don't need a license. But if you are generating anything at all, you need to go through the NERC if it's above 4 megawatts. But the question is this. The law says, item 14 of the second schedule says, a state House of Assembly will have power to make laws in respect of power generation, transmission, and distribution in respect of areas not covered by a national grid, meaning generation that is not on grid. So we talk of immediate power generation, those are not grid-based generation. We talk of captive power generation, those are not grid-based generation. Captive means like TVC now generating its own electricity without distributing. We could have disaggregated grid structure, having extensive off-grid structure. I'll give it to former Minister Raji Fashola. They were generating about 18 megawatts in Lagos, in Alausa Aziz, and another 16 or 18 in Eko. I was aware. I was to handle and advise an entity that says state government was trying to sell power to private entities around Ikeja. Because during the day, Lagos state government cannot use more than 5 megawatts to run the entire ministries. So during the day, they have about 17 to 14 idle megawatts. In the night, they have almost 18 megawatt idle. And somebody put a proposal across to the state government that Fashola that, Your Excellency, can we make use of this your megawatts where you are not using it? And Lagos state government was trying to do something in that regard. And the DISCO in that region went to court saying that was their franchise. The idea of franchising is nonsensical to me. You can't supply megawatts to this entity, yet you have a state government that is so futuristic, it's been able to generate megawatts, wanting to have an arrangement with the private sector so that it can sell grids to them and make money to recoup their investment. And we are saying this is my franchise area. And they went to court and things happened. We can't be having franchised area when megawatts are not generated. So we need to go extensive off-grid. We need to absolutely concession 0 to 10 megawatts of electricity to state governments. We need to deploy mobile power stations that other people are doing. Mobile power station simply means something like a generator. They're doing it in Germany, they're doing it in France, like a house. They ship it in, they may come in 10 megawatts, just like massive mobile power stations. And from there, they distribute. So if you are deploying 10,000 mobile power stations and each generates 5 or even 1 megawatt, that's 10,000 megawatts as against the 3,000 megawatts we are struggling with. So that's what I call decentralized energy option. There was a theory I propounded on power sector, call it DIOPS. It's been used in other countries, meaning with decentralized energy options. I did something for Namibia, a research. I was working with somebody who was generating power from forest. They call it debushing. Debushing. They look at a thick forest. There's a technology that extracts energy from that thick forest. Something like our Sabisa forest could be used to generate power under debushing technology. Energy is such a natural endeavor. During the day, when you have sunshine, it's extensive solar. So we need to go also extensive solarization. Areas like Jos and others are naturally wind turbined. We need to deploy extensive windmills, have solar panel fields, have mobile power stations, have local government-based generation, either through mobile or captive or solar. Each local government will generate 1 megawatt. Each and every of the local governments in Nigeria will generate 1 megawatt in 1 year. For the next 4 years of Asiwaju, that alone will give us conveniently about 7,000 to 10,000 megawatts. Then we now talk of captive generation, mobile power stations, rural electrification, as well as the grid. Then we now go on the grid and enhance grid capacity. While the discos are struggling, they have 3,000 megawatts or less, and it comes at the cost, and they do the mathematics of it, saying this 3,000 megawatts that you have, we need to sell at X plus Y amount of money to be able to recoup our investment so as not to distribute at a loss. It's similar to what we have in the tax regime. Instead of having more customers who can pay bills, they are overbilling the fewer customers that we have. So they need to increase the electricity consumer net so that we have more people within that bracket. So there's a lot that we need to do in the power sector. And I am happy that we have somebody who believes strongly in the philosophy of disaggregated power sector, decentralized concession. So the grid concession that you mentioned before I forget, are you there?
Prof, I have just 1 minute, 60 seconds, please. We need to wrap up now. Go ahead.
The grid concession you talked about, Lagos State should be on a separate grid. We should have state-based grid, meaning Lagos State grid, Ogun State grid. We may have joint grid, meaning Lagos and Ogun may have a joint grid. We may have regional grid, meaning Southwest will be a grid, South-South will be a grid. A state like Rivers State may join Bayelsa and Akwa Ibom, that may be a grid. We may have grid at the level of states. We have grid at the level of states that are economically developed. We have grid at the level of region. We have grid at the level of pairing of states, joint grid. But we need to decentralize the national grid. The idea of federated grid in the 21st century is nonsensical. I thought with that idea, I call it national grid. GREED.
All right, Prof, we have to wrap it up on that note, Professor Yemi. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Professor of Energy and Electricity Law at the University of Lagos. I know Prof has a lot to say. He has a 20-point agenda with regards to this power reactivation.